back, and we are continuing this really important conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Chuck Devore, United States Army retired, a man who has served at the state legislative level with great distinction in California, is now a leading influencer in Texas politics at the Texas Public Policy Institute. Chuck, you have, I think, very handsomely described what's being done in the name of sort of a public health response to the COVID crisis, with considerable deleterious effects on our military. That would be bad enough, but it's being accompanied, as you know, by a policy agenda that, again, seems to be part of this integrated White House Defense Department apparat that is pushing wokeism, for want of a better term. Tell us about how that's manifesting itself and the consequences.
Yeah, Frank, let me give you two big examples. I certainly mentioned one in that piece that I just had in Fox News. And that is the Secretary of the Navy had issued a report about his Climate Action Plan 2030 in an accompanying news release. And he was characterizing the tremendous instability brought on by climate change and how it's an existential threat to the Navy, et cetera. And as you read the language, you realize, of course, that this is going to make its way, if it hasn't already, into Navy fitness reports. Now, in the Army, we have officer evaluation reports. Navy, they have fitness reports. I guess that's with the Marine Corps as well. And it just got me to thinking. I went back into my old files and I pulled up one of my last fitness reports from when I was in a combat unit. We had deployed out to Korea a few times to do a big war game along the demilitarized zone. And there were 22 lines in this, this officer evaluation report between my rater and my senior rater, a full colonel and a lieutenant colonel, and all of the lines related to my ability to contribute to the combat team's ability to survive in combat, to prevail in combat. There was nothing else on those 22 lines that essentially determined my future in the military. And so then you look at it, well, climate change is an existential threat and it's a priority for the Navy. And you think, oh, okay. Well, then that means that there's got to be some lines that have that on these fitness reports. And that if you're an officer and you really want to make a career out of this and you expect to try to go maybe 30 years and get a flag rank, become an admiral if you're in the Navy, then you darn well better pay attention to the Secretary of the Navy's guidance and start to pay attention to climate change and what you can do to presumably reduce the Navy's CO2 emissions, et cetera. None of which, Frank, has anything to do with fighting and prevailing over and defeating the People's Liberation Army Navy and its attendant forces, much less even trying to deter them from action. And so to me, that was very disturbing because you only have so many hours in a week to train. You only have so much training dollars and budget. And now it's being divided up with this sort of thing. That leads to
And on top of it,
yes,
Chuck, of course, you've got the whole critical race
yes.
theory indoctrination that is also taking place. Talk a little bit about how that's factoring into this. And are we seeing, as I understand it, effectively purges of the military of people who are not adequately with these programs?
Yeah, so some of this started in the aftermath of some very bad reporting by CNN, I know, Shock, and NPR in the wake of the January 6th riot. And the claim was that the military veterans were more than doubly represented among those people who were arrested. And this claim was repeated. Well, I looked at the math and I ran some numbers and wrote an article within about a month of the riot debunking that. And then I did a follow up about a year later once the number of people who had been arrested had been doubled. And so I, again, checked into it. And what they did was they forgot to account for a few things, Frank. That number one, about, I don't know, 85% of those people arrested were men, and men overwhelmingly are veterans compared to women. Number two, they included in the base calculation the people who were children and are not eligible to join the military because we frown on child soldiers in this nation. And number three, they excluded the number of people who are in the reserve forces because under the US Census Bureau until recently, reservists were not counted as veterans unless they had actually been activated and sent somewhere. Unless they'd been federalized, like, for example, I was during the LA riots in 1992. And so, because of those math errors, probably intentional, they inflated the percentage of military people there as a share of the general population by double. And so what you really saw was the number of people arrested who were veterans were precisely equal to what you would expect from any random sample of Americans, like in a football stadium. Well, actually, there'd probably be more veterans in a football stadium, but you know what I'm saying. And so then on that basis, the Secretary of Defense and people within the Biden administration said, we have a white supremacist problem in the military. We have to do a stand down to address this issue of white supremacy and extremism, predicated on the entirely false notion that the January 6th riot was overrun with veterans. So you have bad data leading to bad policy decisions that then cause these struggle sessions in the military about, oh, well, you have to be careful about people. If you were a Trump supporter, we might have to take a look at you, right? This has no
Right.
place in the military. It undermines unit cohesion and morale. It harms recruiting. Again, stupid, stupid, stupid.
Yeah. Sadly, it seems of a piece with the larger treatment of this so-called insurrection on January 6th. A lot of books being cooked, a lot of misleading information being disseminated as gospel. And it seems to me a false narrative that an insurrection is what we were dealing with, when in fact it seems what may have been done was a purposeful leaving open of the Capitol to penetration when the security standards were not those of a normal day, and people were waved into the building in some cases. Chuck, that's a subject for another day. Thank you for your time. Thanks for the work you do at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Come back to us with more in all of this soon, if you would. I hope the rest of you will come back to us again next time. Until then, this is Frank Gaffney. Thanks so much for watching. Go forth and multiply.